So if this is the first video that you've seen, I'm sharing videos on some of my favourite books and theories that help with professional development, so you can just get some snippets of learning and build that in to this kind of new way of working that we find ourselves in. The book I want to talk to you about today is absolutely my #1 favourite book, and if you've been on any of my courses, you've certainly heard me talk about this one, and it's Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, the title, I know, isn't always the most impressive, and it's not one of the best books to read on the train through fear of strangers coming up and talking to you. But the good news is we're not on the train at the moment, so it's a great time to read this book whilst you are spending a bit more time by yourselves. The reason I like this book so much is because it's able to describe some of the behaviours that we see in others that make a difference in their relationship with other people. So you probably know people that you work with who you would describe as a really good people person, and they're really good to work with, they're nice people. But then to take that a step further and describe that behaviour in a way that you can actually copy and implement it, it's usually quite hard to break down what it is they're actually doing. And Dale Carnegie does that incredibly well. So his book is actually just a series of behaviours and habits that you can actually implement to improve the responses and relationships you have with other people. Now, the book is full of loads of tips, but for the sake of this video, I've just pulled out some of my favourite ones. So I've got 6 tips that I'm going to run through with you today, which hopefully are things that you can practice and implement into your surroundings, even in this unusual situation. The first observation that Carnegie has that I want to share is to be nice. And that sounds quite simple and obvious. The challenge comes when we're trying to be nice to people who maybe have a very different style of working to us or very different objectives to us. So it's about avoiding any opportunities to criticise or condemn, and instead trying to understand what it is that's driving their behaviour. So I do believe that in the workplace, whatever people are doing, they're doing it with good intentions, but those intentions don't always marry up with our way of looking at things. So clash comes from a lack of understanding. And what the suggestion is when you do see something what you wouldn't necessarily agree with or wouldn't be your way of going about things, rather than disagree with it, instead go around and try and find out more about why the person's behaved in that way, because there will be a good reason for it. The second behaviour from the book that I want to pick out is to be genuinely interested in people. So we hear a lot about listening, how important it is to listen. However, when we're in a conversation, we're often quite keen to be involved in that conversation and talk next. So rather than listen and purely focus on what that person is saying, our mind starts thinking about what we want to say. So the habit here is to focus instead on what the person is saying and forget what you're going to say. Come back to that later on. You can't have an internal dialogue of what you're going to say in the conversation whilst genuinely listening to that other person and focusing on them. If you are going to focus on what to say next, that focus needs to be on a question you're going to ask them to allow them to keep talking for longer about the topic they're interested in. The next suggestion from Carnegie is one of the first interactions we actually learn as babies, and it's simply to smile. So when we smile, it makes people feel compelled to smile back at us. And let me just give you that as a challenge to do in your household if you are isolating with other people. So make eye contact with someone, break into a genuine smile, so no pretend smiles, it's got to be one that involves your whole face, and see how long it takes for them to crack and smile back at you. Hello? Hello? Hi? 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 Yeah. Smiling's a really natural way of showing that we are approachable and friendly and that people can relax around us. The fourth tip from the book that I want to share is one that quite often we find quite challenging, and that's to learn and use people's names. So I imagine if you think back, you can remember a situation where you'd met somebody before and a little bit of time had passed and you saw them again. And you didn't remember their name, but they remembered yours. And it makes you feel quite awkward, but at the same time you feel quite flattered that they remembered who you were. And the fact that you felt like that about them is a fantastic way to show other people that you've remembered and you've cared about them. So it is a tough skill to learn, but it's one worth developing as much as you realistically can. Now, how can we use that one at the moment when we're at home? there's some quite nice techniques that are actually available for us now. So chances are, if you're going into a meeting, it's a virtual meeting, and you have a list of people who are going to be on that call in advance, what you can actually do is just list out those people, and as everyone introduces themselves, you can make a note of maybe what colour they're wearing. So then as you refer back to them later on, you've got a little bit of a chart to help you remember what everyone's names are. Some of the systems that people are using, particularly Zoom, for example, will actually put the name on your screen so you can see against the picture the name of the person you're talking to. So it's right there for you. Try and use it as much as you can. Through using people's names, you will remember them a lot quicker. So the fifth suggestion from the book that I wanted to share is to be a good listener. And this is one that I really like sharing, because as I give the example, everyone kind of nods and goes, yeah, I do that. And this is when somebody's talking to us about something they're really excited about. So quite often it's a holiday. So for example, someone's talking to you about a holiday that they've got coming up, let's say next year, because we haven't got any holidays in the short term. And they're going somewhere they're really excited about. So for example, they're going to New York, and you have been to New York. So as they're telling you this story about how they've booked a holiday to New York, your instant response really wants to be, oh, I've been there. Let me tell you about the holiday I had there and give you all the advice that I have from my trip, and turn this conversation into one of my experience. And actually what the person wants is just to talk about their excitement around the trip that they've got coming up. And it's quite natural we're going to do that. It's something that I do a lot, and I just try and kick myself when I do it and try and turn the conversation back. So for example, if you were to say to me, I've booked a honeymoon, I'm going to New York, and then I said, oh, I've been there. My next sentence then should be, tell me about it. Have you been before? And what are you going for, and when are you going? So you revert it back to questions to allow the person to carry on telling you all about the trip that they're excited about. And then once they're done, then you can share your experiences. But just make sure you don't hijack the conversation back to you too early because of your excitement. The sixth and final piece of advice from the book that I'm going to share today is to be sincere. And that's really around making sure that you're able to compliment people, but in a way that's genuine. And there will be situations and people that you work with that you do find quite challenging, and that can make this quite hard. But what the push is here is to try and think a bit deeper. So maybe you work with someone who you find quite stubborn, and it's quite hard working with them because they've always made up their mind about how they want to do things, and there's not much room for your input. Now that can cause you some frustration. However, if you look a bit deeper at it, there must be something that you respect about them. Okay? So for example, with that scenario, it might be that you respect the fact that they really think things through and make up their own mind, and they know what they want. That might equally frustrate you because you find them stubborn, but the fact that they're able to think things through and come to their own conclusions about things should have some level of admiration in there as well. So the challenge here is when somebody does cause you frustration or challenge in the workplace, try and look a bit deeper as to what about it you can admire. So once you find that one thing that you can admire, there's a positive light you can put on it, which will make your interactions with them feel a lot more sincere and a lot more genuine, and then ease up any frustration that's there. So those are the 6 tips from the book that I wanted to share with you today. So this is my absolute favourite book. I've read it now 4 times. Every time I read it, I pick up new things that I'm going to kick myself about, or that I've done recently. And people that I meet that I have huge admiration for their relationship skills. This book really, as I read through it, makes me think of them and understand some of the things that they do, often naturally, but sometimes learnt behaviours that I can actually learn from and try and improve for myself. This is also a really easy book to read. So each chapter really is a piece of advice, and you can pick that up and read it in 5 to 10 minutes and put it down, and then spend a couple of days working on that particular tip. So it's quite an easy one to pick up and put down and read at a really leisurely pace if that suits your style of reading. So I hope you found that helpful. If you're also looking at starting or continuing with your ACII or going on to your FCII at the moment, I've recently created some videos to talk through the steps of those. So you can either check out from my previous post or get in touch with me if you'd like any links or supportive information to help you carry on with your learning whilst we are working from home. Thanks.